Hello, welcome to Ramen Night, where we examine old gems, usually from talented Asian creators, and eat ramen. Tonight we'll be thoroughly examining the 1991 Chinese film Riki Oh, the story of Riki. The film stars Fan Su-long, who you may recognize from Ip Man, The Monkey King, and Kung Fu Chefs. The film is based on a manga created by Masahiko Takajo and Saruwatari Tetsuya. The manga was originally written in Japanese, obviously, but had a Chinese translation and was very popular over there. There was never an official English translation, but let's face it, the demand for manga in the West wasn't as strong as it is today. Luckily, you can find translations floating around the web. Okay, so we're gonna make some ramen. Let's gather our supplies. First, you're gonna need some ramen. This is some spicy Taiwan ramen. If you're in the States, you're probably stuck with top ramen, in which case I only condone the oriental flavor. Get yourself a big old thing of soy sauce, some cheap, real cheap whiskey, Thai red stuff, random thick dark meat sauce, and assorted vegetables. It's important that they are assorted. Then, meat of some description. I chose pork, but chicken or beef worked too. Anything from the Holy Trinity. Okay, so let's chop up our vegetables. The manga has been adapted into 2 OVAs. The first, Riki Oh, The Wall of Hell, follows the same story as the 1991 film, and does it in a cool 48 minutes and 25 seconds. If you're a fan of the film, you'll probably like the anime, and the second OVA is a continuation of Riki's story, so you should totally check that out. I'm gonna cook this pork real quick. Pepper, salt, and the whiskey. That's Nika whiskey. It practically grows on trees in Japan. It's really cheap and gives you horrible hangovers. Add some soy sauce too. Keep jabbing it with your spatula until everything's cooked. Okay, get some water. Just eyeball it. You'll be fine. Add some veggies and a big splash of soy sauce. Now we wait for it to boil. Financially speaking, Riki Oh was a decent success in Hong Kong, but didn't make much money overseas. Over the years, the film's received cult status as not only a kung fu body horror action flick, but as one of the more successful anime adaptations. Now add your ramen, but hold on to your flavor packet. We'll use the packet in this household. Now let's add some of that spicy red stuff, some brown sauce. Okay, let's give it 3 minutes to cook the noodles. The film is similar to the anime and manga in many ways. There are a few differences, but it's a pretty faithful adaptation. Here's the plot. By 2001, all prisons have been privatized. Wow, nailed that prediction. Riki has been sentenced to 10 years for manslaughter. Once inside, Riki involves himself in the lives of other inmates, becoming a savior of sorts. This triggers a war with the prison gang leaders and ultimately the warden of the prison. Eventually, Riki discovers the prison's secret poppy grow up, and it burns it to the ground. Okay, the ramen's ready. Now find yourself a big old bowl, if possible a bucket. I don't have a proper ramen bucket, but metal buckets work the best. Now chow down. Okay, let's talk about why this film has such cult appeal. Due to Riki's martial arts training, he has superhuman strength, which means he can break a dude's skull without much effort. This leads to some inventive fight scenes. Riki Oh is an action movie first, and a violent love letter to gore second. This movie is full of beautiful, fake-looking practical effects. This is the good stuff. I'm talking rubbery fake flesh, buckets of corn syrup. I mean, this isn't the most realistic stuff, especially by modern standards. But I dig those late 80s, early 90s special effects, where the skin is obviously plastic with that overt fake sheen to it. Then you have like a knife or something, pierce it, and it reminds you you're tearing apart like a Stretch Armstrong or something. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Let's take a look at some of these fights. This is the first major fight Riki has in the movie. He's squaring off against one of those gang leaders. And as you can see, they're going all out. This isn't some ballet recital Jackie Chan type shit. These dudes are trying to murderize each other by any means necessary. I mean, would you look at this? Beautiful! Now, in a normal movie fight, our hero would try to persevere despite his handicap. This movie says fuck that logic. He ties his fucking tendons back together and they go back at it. You don't get that in Hollywood movies. So what did we have there? We had a pretty lackluster kung fu scene, admittedly. The punches were highly choreographed, something you'd see in your standard kung fu B-movie affair. But what Riki Oh does really well is it rises the medium with special effects and inventive fight maneuvers. Yeah, I mean, you probably thought the beginning of that fight was shitty. It didn't look like it was going to be fun. But once they add in the knife, it added in a whole new element. And when you saw what the characters were willing to do to fight each other, it kind of lifts it above a standard kung fu scene. And that's what this movie does so well. It takes things you would see in anime and movies, things that are way over the top, crazy, and it puts them on the screen. But Riki Oh is more than just gore porn. There's an interesting commentary about industrialized prisons and capitalist ideology running throughout. This subtext, while never coming to the forefront of the film, leaves the viewer wondering what life is like outside of the prison in this dystopian future of 1991. Another reason that I, and many other YouTubers, have made note of this film is that Riki Oh is one of the more successful anime manga adaptations. Yet, in the field of adaptation studies, which is a real thing, there is little written about this movie. I find this odd, especially as people keep proselytizing an incoming wave of anime movie adaptations. When we see what Disney is doing with Marvel, you can't help but wondering when these anime properties will get the same treatment. Everyone has been waiting for like a studio to really nail one of these things, but so far Hollywood's fallen short or completely missed the mark in some cases. Many people thought Ghost in the Shell would be the harbinger of this change, but we all know how that turned out. Riki Oh successfully tells a full anime arc in a 1.5 hour movie. It delivers all the major plot points and feeling of progression as Riki battles through a rogues gallery of enemies. The prison's split into 4 wings and each wing has a leader. And of course, these leaders all have specialized martial arts abilities. We got the standard martial arts savage dude. This isn't Riki's first fight of the film, but it's the first real test of his mettle. And this fight is really brutal, with both characters taking a severe amount of abuse. We got the classic strong guy, the oddball who uses crocheting needles as weapons, and the androgynous leader who's quite the acrobat. Then we have the bumbling administrator with the hook hand and sadistic personality, and finally the warden of the prison who controls everything calmly and confidently. This is a great film, but it had some shortcomings. Now, I'm not going to sit here like Plot Point Holmes and dissect this movie. That doesn't really interest me, and it wouldn't paint an accurate portrait of this film. So here are just some small problems I have with the movie. First off, the English dub is notoriously bad. This is problematic as the dub is the most ubiquitous version found online. If you find the Chinese version with the subtitles, I highly recommend that version. We're kind of just thrown into the setting and not giving many details about Riki. You have to just accept a lot of things. This isn't a huge problem for me, but I find this to be a weird give and take. We see Riki go from being a brand new inmate to being known by everyone in the prison in like one scene. Then he becomes a messiah figure very quickly. I go back and forth on this. I think ultimately this may be a good thing. We have enough information to jumpstart the story and we don't get bogged down with obvious exposition. Exposition is a big hurdle for these anime films, as their worlds are often extremely intricate and initially esoteric. Other than some introductory text, the film doesn't really worry about exposition too much. They're in future prison. They know martial arts. Super duper. Also, I am not a fan of the flashback scenes. The training scene isn't interesting, doesn't add anything to the film. The romance scenes are really awkward, and these scenes are where the dub really gets to showcase its awfulness. These scenes really infantilize Riki in an off-putting way, and of course, the scene where Riki's girlfriend jumps off the building while running away from the drug dealers. Oh my god, such camp, much unrealism. I find some of these problems to be endearing, and none of them are deal breakers for me. So, Riki Oh, The Story of Riki, is an interesting anime adaptation that delivers no shortage of violence and some decent kung fu scenes. There are a few awkward scenes and a horrible dub, but this is an excellent film. Also, a quick note, I only took video footage from around the first half of the movie. There's a lot of extra fights in the second half and things that you might be interested in. So I tried not to spoil as much of the visual effects of this movie as I could. I think you should definitely watch the second half of this movie. You can find this movie hanging out all over the internet. Give it a watch. If you like the film, there's an unofficial sequel titled Super Powerful Man that is loosely based on the second half of Riki's story. Good night.